One of the most beautiful things about traditional Mexican cuisine to me is how many different dishes there are that essentially boil down to different preparations of corn and pork. Think carnitas tacos or tamales. They're really a testament to the versatility of basic ingredients and the creativity and ingenuity of those who make them. This one today is no exception, pozole rojo to be specific. It was first made by the Aztecs for ceremonial gatherings, and now it's maybe my favorite holiday tradition. I try to make at least one big pot of it every winter, and here's how I do it. The first thing I'll do is get my favorite big pot over about medium-high heat. I like to do this whole thing as a one-pot operation, so it's pretty much all gonna happen here. I want to roast some aromatics that I'll use later, so first thing in the pot is half a head of garlic, cloves separated but still in their jackets. The skins will prevent them from sticking and will also prevent them from picking up too much char, which would make them bitter. Make sure you use a metal utensil for this. This pan is hot and dry and can melt a plastic spoon, I know from experience. Once I get some dark spots on the outside like this, they're done, so I'll take those out and set them to the side. Next, I'm going to add just a little bit of vegetable oil to the pan and roast an onion that's been cut in half. Onions can be pretty sticky, so the oil will help with that. And keeping the halves intact like this for now will prevent them from falling apart too much at this state, making them easier to handle. Just like the garlic, I'm looking for some char on the exposed side and not much else, so this looks good to me. I'll reserve these with the garlic for use later. By the way, if you want to clean the pan out and get rid of all those bits in there, go ahead, but it's all going to get strained out later, so it's not a big deal. Okay, a touch more oil, and now in goes the pork. This is a roughly 2-pound piece of bone-in, skin-on pork shoulder that I'm going to sear on each side. Now, you don't have to use pork for this. You can do a chicken version, you can use beans if you want to keep it vegetarian, or if you're the ancient Aztecs, you could use humans. But I like the pork version, so that's what I'm going with. Once I'm happy with the sear, I'll add a few pieces of trotters. These are optional but have a ton of collagen and add great texture. Then goes some aromatics, which will be 1 onion cut in half, and another half a head of garlic, peeled this time. Note, this is not the garlic and onion from earlier. These are fresh specimens, and the roasted stuff is still off to the side for another use. I'll add enough water to just about cover everything and bring this up to a boil. Now, for the first 30 minutes or so of this simmering, you'll notice a lot of gunk floating to the top. This is a normal part of the process, just proteins and stuff from inside the bones coagulating, but we do want to get rid of it, so I'll skim that off. This may happen a few times at the beginning, so be sure to check the pot every 10 minutes or so until you're sure you've gotten at least the majority of it out of there. Now that the stock is looking good, it's time to hydrate the chilies. This here is 12 guajillos, 5 anchos, and 3 árboles that I've stemmed and seeded. The mix of chilies is up to you, but I'd say keep the majority of it to guajillos. My general rule of thumb with dried chilies is prep as many as you think you're going to want, and then add a few more. I find it hard to overdo it here, especially with the milder varieties. And I do this right in the pot with everything else because great stews are all about building up layers of flavor. If you do everything in one pot, there's less room to lose flavor and your final product will be better off for it. After 10 or 15 minutes, the chilies should be hydrated and pliable, so I'll fish those out and they'll go straight into my blender. It's okay if some little chunks of onion and garlic come along, but I try to avoid them as much as I can. With those out of the way now, I'll take the opportunity to add some spices to the pot. For that, I've got a big pinch of Mexican oregano, around a teaspoon of cumin that I've lightly crushed with a mortar and pestle, 1 cinnamon stick, and a few grinds of black pepper. No salt for now because this is going to cook a long time and it'll be easier to adjust that later. This pot is now going to simmer for 4 or 5 hours or until the pork is falling off the bone. Back to the blender with the chilies now. This is where I'm going to employ the charred garlic and onion from earlier. Just make sure you peel them first. Those go in, and then I'll add 1 big spoonful of chicken Better Than Bullion. It's got a ton of meaty, savory flavor, and it's a great shortcut for making just about anything taste better. Then in goes a couple ladles full of stock from the pot. You really don't need a specific measurement here, just add enough so it'll blend smoothly. After a minute or so on high, it should be pretty smooth, but those chili skins are tough and can add a lot of unwanted bitterness, so I'll strain out the little bits before I use it. This may take a while, but be patient with it and your efforts will be rewarded. Besides, we've got a few hours to kill before the pork is done anyways. When you get to the end, just make sure to squeeze out as much of that liquid as possible. We don't want any of that to go to waste because this mixture, called the adobo, serves as the flavor base for lots of Mexican dishes and is one of the most delicious substances known to man. Okay, let's fast forward a few hours into the future. My pork has simmered long enough, and how do I know this? That's how. This is all going to get passed through a colander to collect the big stuff, and I'll shred up the pork shoulder. The feet, you can try to pick off the tiny bits of meat there, but it can be hard to find, so it's okay, I think, to discard those. They were mostly here to provide flavor and body to the stock, and they've served their purpose. The empty pot is going back on the stove now, and the first thing back in is going to be the adobo. Searing the sauce like this adds even more complexity and flavor, even if my pan wasn't exactly hot enough to do this step properly. But that's okay, because now I'll add my stock back in, which I'll pass through a fine mesh strainer just in case there are any small bits of bones in there. The spices have given up all they have to offer at this point anyways, so it's okay if we get rid of those too. Then goes all of the meat from the pork shoulder. I remove the skin and any big chunks of fat that I don't want to eat. And finally, one 28-ounce can of hominy, drained and rinsed. Hominy is corn that's gone through the nixtamalization process, the same as what one does to make masa. It's got a texture kinda like a chickpea, but the flavor of a corn tortilla. Now, if you want that flavor to really permeate the whole soup, you can use dried hominy, in which case you would soak it overnight and simmer it along with the pork, but the canned stuff is easy and it's still gonna taste great. This is gonna simmer now for about 30 minutes or until the hominy is fully tender. And since I like my pozole nice and thick, I'm gonna leave the lid off so it can reduce a bit. But if you're happy with the consistency of yours, you can leave the lid on for this. Now, the last step here before serving is to adjust the seasoning. Remember, I haven't added any salt to this other than what was in the Better Than Bullion, so a couple big pinches go in, and then I also like to add a little vinegar at this point. This is apple cider vinegar, but anything will do. Not too much because we're going to serve this with lime wedges, but a little does a lot to wake up all those deep, rich flavors, just like the salt. To serve, I like a big handful of shredded iceberg lettuce mixed with chopped cilantro, followed by a scattering of diced radishes, and a generous squeeze of lime. I can't go on enough about how comforting and delicious this is. You can see how much body that stock has. It's so rich, but also spicy and bright from all those chilies and lime. It's one of my favorite meals, and I'll never go a holiday season without it. If you like what you see and want to like and subscribe, it really helps me out. And for written recipes for everything I do here, along with other fun exclusive stuff, consider supporting me on Patreon. The link for that is in the description. That's all for this one. Thanks!